Our next game marks the beginning of a bitter rivalry, actually the biggest rivalry in chess between Rivalry Tarrasch and Aaron Nimzowitsch, two leading players of the early 20th century who had a very different approach to chess. Tarrasch, being a classicist playing by the principles of the 19th century, and Nimzowitsch, a creative thinker who came up with hypermodern ideas. The two played against each other their first game in 1904, and it was supposed to be a casual game, but Nimzowitsch decided to publicize the game and invite the press. Tarrasch did not like much this idea and went on to state one of his most famous quotes during the game about the position he had after move 10, saying, "Never in my life have I had such a won game after 10 moves as I have now." Let's see how this very friendly game between the two went. It starts with d4, d5, Tarrasch with the white pieces and Nimzowitsch with the black pieces, c4, knight c6. The Chigorin defense of the Queen's Gambit declined. Chigorin was also one of the top players of the same era. Knight f3, bishop g4, e3, e6, knight c3, and now Nimzowitsch decides to take the knight on f3, and then, in order to defend the d5 pawn which is hanging, he plays the very strange move knight ce7. Now, I like creative ideas, but even to my standards, this is a little too creative. I don't see what was wrong with natural developing moves like knight to f6 or bishop b4 to pin the knight. So knight c to e7 is a mistake. It's a very modern idea, maybe too modern. Not developing. Development is so crucial in chess. Look at Black's pieces just standing on the back rank, and the only piece that he has moved already twice is this knight. So what happens later in the game was White continues his development, bishop to d3, c6, strengthening the center, and after castle, Nimzowitsch plays f5. This is yet another modern move. Instead of developing with knight f6, he plays f5. Now, this makes more sense than knight c to e7, since what he wants is to keep the position closed by controlling the e4 square where White could try to break through and open up the position. When your king is in the middle of the board and you are so undeveloped, you really should pray for the position to stay closed. Now, it is a waste of tempo at the same time, so yes, the positions stay closed for a while, but once again, Black did not develop a piece. Bishop d2, White continues with his development. Each and every move of White has been a developing move, and after knight f6, he goes for c takes d5. Tarrasch gives actually an exclamation mark to this move, opening up the c5 and then bringing the rook to c1. Another way of playing. Now, looking at this position over 100 years later and using engines, a plan could have been simply queen dropping back to e2 or moving to h3 in order to vacate the f3 square for the pawn, because this is the breakthrough that White wants, opening up the position so that this king on e8 can be exposed. Now, after c takes d5, this is move 10. This is the critical moment when Tarrasch said, "Never in my life have I had such a won position after 10 moves as I have now." So if he had such a winning position, and it's true that his position is winning, how comes that this game was not won by Tarrasch? I'm not going to tell you the result. Now you have two options, whether it's a draw or Nimzowitsch wins, but it's not a victory for White. Let's see what happens. g5, move 11. Nimzowitsch not developing but pushing a pawn on the king side with his king in the middle of the board. This is ultra modern. g5 in the style of youth, according to Nimzowitsch. Not a very good move, but it makes the position interesting, that is for sure. His idea is a bit strange to me. After queen g3, he simply offers this g-pawn to his opponent, and it can be captured. There's nothing wrong with queen takes g5, since if Black plays rook g8, the White queen can drop back to h4. There's no way of trapping this queen, and it's a pawn up. Pawn up for White, and development and safer king, so everything is in white's favor in this position. Tarrasch didn't take the pawn immediately but went for f3 first, but Nimzowitsch, as he wanted to sacrifice the g5 pawn, he does not defend it, even if he had the chance to do so. Knight c6 played, and after queen takes g5, bishop e7. Sure, it looks like there are some threats for black, but it's more of a ghost idea. The knight can never really go for a discovered attack with this bishop attacking the queen, because queen h5 will be a check, so there's no knight e4 jump. And as we have mentioned, if rook g8, the queen can simply move back. So yeah, there's some initiative on the king's side, but it's certainly not enough compensation for the sacrificed material and the fact that the king is on f7. Knight e2 was played by Tarrasch. It's a good move, bringing the knight to the king's side. And after queen b6, he defends his b2 pawn with bishop c3. Maybe it was not needed, but it's a safe move for sure. Now the a rook comes to g8, so clearly black wants to create attack on the king's side, and that's what he should do. He has sacrificed the pawn to open up the g file, and now he's about to double rooks on the g file. Here, a very simple move for white would have been knight to f4, asking this rook where does it want to go. It has to go back either to g8 or to g7, but after rook to g7, e4, this is what white wanted, to blow up the center, open up the e and f files, and attack the black king in the middle of the board. So this would have been just a very much winning position for white. He did not do this. He didn't play knight f4, and I wonder why not. He went instead queen h3, stepping out of this diagonal, which was not so dangerous, as if after rook g6, knight f4, knight e4, once again the queen on h5 would have been just a winning move, because we are going to capture this rook. Anyhow, queen h3, and now bishop to f8. This is a really modern move, but actually here I start to like it. Black is worse, and black is a pawn down, but he's making sure that there's a lot of fight, and he's creating counter chances. He wants to bring this rook to the h file and the other rook to the g file. So bishop f8, even though it looks very ugly, going back to the back rank, is quite a creative idea that I actually like. Knight f4, and the rook comes to h8. Now bishop back to d6, because it has finished this job on f8. The rook has been placed on h6, and this rook will be coming to g8. So this is actually a complex position. It's not so easy anymore for white to win this, even though he's material up, because black has managed to activate most of his pieces. Actually, all of them are active. Unlike white's pieces, not all the white pieces are active. And he starts creating some threats. g3 is played, and after bishop takes, e takes, knight h5, threatening the pawn, white goes queen e3. Now in this position, I would like you to pause the video and try to figure out the only way for black to create counterplay. In this moment, if he does not play the one single move that can mess things up, his position is lost. But there's one move, one idea that can complicate matters and create chances for black. So pause the video and try to figure out a brilliant idea in this position. It is not the knight sacrifice. Knight takes g3 is actually not so good. It's going to be simply a piece down. You can analyze it for sure, but I'm not going to go into depth. That is not the right move here, but e5, a pawn sacrifice. It's going to be 2 pawns down for black, but the idea behind this pawn break is that it has to be captured with the f pawn. The d pawn cannot take it because there's a pin on the a7 g1 diagonal. So f takes e5, a must play move, otherwise the d4 pawn drops, or the f4 pawn as well. F takes e5, and now f4. So vacating the f4 square has been the main idea behind the e5 push, and now the queen has to go somewhere. Queen moves, and black is winning back the pawn. Not f takes g3, because careful, do not blunder your rook, but simply taking the d4 pawn. Now, in this moment, white still has a good move, after which he would have had a winning position, or at least a very advantageous position. And that move was, if you want to pause the video, make sure that you do it right now before I say it, bishop to g6 check. This was the best move in the position, so that after this bishop is taken, we capture the knight on d4, threatening queen takes d5 check. And if f takes g3, looking very dangerous with this g file and our king about to be mated. h3, cold-blooded engine move. Queen takes d5 check is tempting but doesn't help white's cause, because the king moves to e8, let's say, and now after h3, knight f4, white is in trouble, very much in trouble. It would have been almost game over. The queen is hanging and other ideas are coming too, so this is just lost for white. It was a very complicated position already, so it's normal that white didn't go for it. Engines see everything and they have no nerves or emotions. White played king g2, which makes a lot of sense, bringing the king out of this diagonal. And now a very strong move, knight takes g3. Now this is a different scenario of capturing that pawn, right? Can't really be taken, because white is going to be in trouble. Several ways of getting into trouble. The knight can jump with a check, winning the queen. The rook can come to h2. You can decide how you want to win the game. So the knight is untouchable. Queen takes f4 was played. Check. And now a counter check. Knight g to f5. Look at this game. It's such an exciting game, played over 100 years ago. King h1, and white is still winning, well, still has the advantage, but the position is not so easy anymore. Nimzowitsch goes for a very interesting, inspiring sacrifice that shouldn't really work. But he goes for it. Rook takes h2, sacrificing the rook. He has sacrificed a couple of pawns in this game, and now the rook. What's the idea? Well, it cannot be taken with the queen, because then knight g3 is a check, which is super annoying. So king takes h2, and now the queen comes over to the g5, threatening mate. Queen h5 and queen g2 are the two main threats, mate in 1 and mate in 2. So what can you do as white? You're about to be mated, both on g2 and h5. Those are squares that cannot be protected from the same square unless you can jump to h3 with a queen, which is illegal. So the only way to save the situation and win, the only way to win this game, there's only one move, one single move that wins in this position, and you gotta find it. Please pause the video and try to find the one single move that wins the game here on the spot. One move, there's no other move. Let's see what you have come up with. It is a move that was missed by Mr. Tarrasch. So if you haven't played e6 check, then don't worry, Tarrasch didn't play it either. e6 check was winning on the spot. And the reason behind it is that if it's taken, let's say, if it's taken with a knight, easy, we're gonna capture here. If it's taken with the queen, then there's no more threat of queen g2 and queen h5. So we have deflected the queen, and now we have time to capture the knight on d4. Easy. So the only thing is, what happens after king takes e6, right? And the explanation is not so easy to see. After king going back to d7, once again, there's only one way of winning here, and that is a brilliant move, a beauty prize move. Rook e7 check. Wow! That square is unprotected. It can be captured with two pieces legally, although we can all see that if it's taken by the knight, then we are winning a queen. But still, it is such a beauty. Rook e7, and if king takes e7, what's the idea? Well, the only idea of rook e7 was that we can go to c7 with the queen, and now the black king has no good squares. For instance, if he goes to f6, now we take on d4, and this bishop cannot be captured because of the pin. So it's gonna be mate, or we are winning the queen, the way black prefers. You can analyze these positions, make sure that you set it up on a real chessboard or in your computer. Feel free to analyze any of these variations. We don't have time to go through all of them. Just simply remember that in this moment, when black is threatening mate with two different ideas, there was still time for white to hit first with e6 check. And then white would have arrived first with his attack. An idea missed by Tarrasch. He goes queen g4, which is a way to prevent the mate. But after queen h6, queen h3, queen f4 check, king h1, and knight g3, black is winning back the material that he has sacrificed. King g2, and here they repeat moves. Knight going to f5, king h1. So it could have ended in a draw. If Nimzowitsch wanted to make a draw, he could have repeated. But he didn't. He fought on. He took on f1. And after king takes f1, he takes on c1. And look at this, suddenly black is an exchange up. He sacrificed pawns and the rook, and now he's an exchange up. Whoa. Sudden turn of events. Bishop to e1. And well, he decided to give back the exchange immediately with rook g1 check. The reason is that even though black is an exchange up, his position is quite scary. White has got the pair of bishops and this monster pass pawn plus threatening queen takes h7 check, or queen d7 check, or queen h5 check. So many queen checks that it is really difficult to play with black suddenly. So he gives back the exchange. Rook g1, king takes, queen takes e1. He gives back the exchange so that he takes the initiative. Now it is his pieces, the queen and the knight, that are more active than white's pieces. Queen takes h7 check, and black plays an inaccurate move, queen g7. Nimzowitsch goes for the endgame, and I think that is a slightly imprecise move, because he could have kept the queens on the board. I'm always emphasizing at moments of trading pieces that you should evaluate what pieces are coming off of the board and what remains on the board. In this case, would you want to get rid of this queen, which is in the middle of the board, threatening queen g3 and queen e3, and you're also threatening knight f3. So the knight and the queen are working so well together. Would you want to get rid of that piece if you had the choice of keeping it on the board? Probably not. If you can just simply play king to f8 and not worry so much about the loss of this pawn, because black certainly has at least compensation with these checks in the air. Of course, this is something to calculate, but simply by intuition, having these two wonderful pieces would have definitely helped black's cause. Instead, he goes for an endgame, which is slightly inferior. And the reason for this endgame to be inferior is that white has got a bishop versus the knight, and there are still plenty of pawns on the board, so the bishop is going to be stronger. Plus, this pawn is weak, so white is going to approach that pawn, attack it with the bishop and the king. And after some moves, we are not going to analyze much this endgame. If you want, you can do it, of course. Tarrasch had winning chances, but here it's going to be soon very close to equal. One of the pawns, a pair of pawns, comes off of the board. Still some chances here, but Nimzowitsch defended well. I only want to show you how it finished later, because Nimzowitsch managed to defend. It was not an easy game, not an easy endgame to defend, but he manages to defend by simply keeping the black king on c7, and then when the pawn push comes a5, b6, there's just not enough pawns left on the board. If there were more pawns on the board, let's say a few more pawns on the king side, then of course white would be still winning, because after b7, black has to give up his knight for the piece. But since that's the only pawn on the board, it was not enough material for Tarrasch to win this game. We have rushed through the endgame on purpose, because I must keep these videos shorter than how much time I would need for explaining the endgame. So definitely feel free to analyze it And make sure also to check out the crucial parts of the middle game, especially how it started out, the funny moment of move 10, and Tarrasch's claim that he has never in his life had such a winning position as this one against Nimzowitsch. He certainly had a winning position, and then he went on to win a pawn, but it wasn't enough. Nimzowitsch created counter chances with some very creative ideas, like this bishop f8 and rook to h6. I hope that you enjoyed this game, and make sure to check out the exercises, solve them all, and I will see you soon in the next video.